So Jeff and Mark and John, if the three of you can come to the stage, please. I know John Yates will be introducing our guests in greater detail in a moment or two, but I wanted to take a moment to introduce or reintroduce you to past President John Yates, who's become a really good friend of mine. John is now the chairman of the Rotary Board, as well as the chairman of Morris, Manning & Martin. He really needs no introduction or even reintroduction given the impact he has made at our club, in our community, and the subject of today's conversation, our technology industry. With over 30 years of experience, John has been instrumental in advising and supporting technology companies, investors, and entrepreneurs, helping to grow the tech ecosystem in Atlanta and beyond. In addition to his legal work, he is a passionate advocate for entrepreneurship and an active board member of numerous tech organizations contributing to the growth and success of startups, not just here, but across the country. And of course, many people know him as a highly respected attorney located here in Atlanta, but he's been visiting with venture capitalists and exploring opportunities throughout the country. In fact, it was during the course of one of those discussions, I believe, John, that you had dinner with Jeff and Mayor Andre Dickens to talk about what Atlanta can do to learn from Silicon Valley and perhaps surpass it. So we are eagerly looking forward to this conversation that was born this evening. So let's give everybody a warm welcome to Atlanta Rotary today.
Adrian, thank you very much. I must say it's a pleasure to be a part of this club and under your leadership. It's also nice on Sunday evenings not to have to worry about the program on Monday for lunch. But it was a little different this year because I got an email on Saturday morning that Vanessa Larco, who is going to be with us today and is a wonderful venture capitalist, works closely with Jeff. She's one of the leading partners in the venture community with NEA, had come down with COVID. So thanks goodness for Gina Simpson, our executive director, and for Jeff Immelt, who was very kind to say, listen, I'm coming anyway. And particularly for Mark Begor, our CEO of one of our most exciting companies in Atlanta and one of the most exciting companies in the country in Equifax. So Jeff and Mark, thank you for being with us today. We greatly appreciate it. So I will tell you too, when you research a program you're going to have, you try to go through lots of different resources. You go through Wikipedia, you go through backgrounds. The backgrounds on Jeff and Mark are multitudinous. They're voluminous, so there's a lot there. But what I did was did a little research. Jeff, I knew he was a former CEO of General Electric for 16 years, is that right, Jeff? He was with General Electric for I think 35 years, as I think Mark, you may have been there for about 35 years too.
Thanks for dating us.
Well, then I look at the bio, I go on Wikipedia and I'm thinking, I just want to know a little bit about this guy. You know, I met Jeff out in Silicon Valley, as Adrian said, along with the mayor, who was kindly out there to hear from Jeff and Vanessa about how we can make Atlanta a tech hub. And Jeff, we want to get more thoughts from you on that. And so I go into Wikipedia and I look and I see, okay, first of all, it gives the facts about him. It says born in 1956. I said, that's interesting. I was born in 1956. Turns out Jeff's older than I am by 75 days. I look and I say, it says born in Cincinnati, Ohio. I said, I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. I look at it a little further, said, Jeff's mother was a school teacher. Well, my mother was a school teacher too. Jeff went to a college that begins with the letter D. He went to Dartmouth. I went to Duke. I said, unbelievable. I said, maybe we were separated at birth. I looked at the picture, says Jeff is much better looking person than I am. So Jeff has an unbelievable career. He's also written a book that we'll talk a little bit more about. But what's so exciting was to be able to get Jeff on stage with Mark Begor. And Mark and Jeff work together. So we're going to see an interesting dynamic here today. And the title of our program, Leaders on the Hot Seat, Hard-Won Lessons for Atlanta Executives in Challenging Times. Now a little bit more about both of these gentlemen and some of their backgrounds, because if you think about it, and we were talking about this, it's a rare situation, isn't it? I mean, I don't know, Mark, do you have anybody that's been 35 years at Equifax? And you were 35 years at General Electric.
I know we've got some 20 and 25. It's actually a great fun fact for the room. Equifax is going to celebrate a 125-year anniversary this year. So we've been in Atlanta for 125 years and are super proud to call this home. And there's a handful that have that kind of legacy, but as you point out, not many.
Yeah, anybody in the room that's been working the same place for over 35 years? Let the record reflect. There's a couple people back here, the mature audience back here. Well, what's very interesting also is to think about the areas that they've been involved in. And under Jeff's leadership, when Mark came on board, just think about this background here for Mark. So he was the, most recently, before he left GE, he was the head of the GE Energy Management Team, 27,000 global executives. He reported at that time, I think, directly to Jeff, didn't you? Okay, he was, and this goes to show what, the variety of General Electric too. Mark was the president and CEO of GE Capital Real Estate at one point. He was the president and CEO of GE Capital Retail Finance, or Synchrony Financial, which is still here in town. He was the chief financial officer of NBC Universal Media. That must have been an interesting gig.
That was a great job.
And GE Investor Relations, and he's currently on the board of directors of NCR Atleos. So it was interesting in doing the research, and I'll ask you this question, Jeff. It stated that Mark was known for taking on the toughest turnaround growth roles at GE. Is that true?
If you read it, it has to be true, right? Isn't it? No, look, Mark and I we actually started as really young guys together. So we've known each other for 30 or 40 years and seen each other grow. So I think when I became CEO, I always knew Mark was somebody I could trust to put into a number of different jobs and would know that you'd get high integrity, high performance. We both kind of went through our careers, and then I became kind of CEO-elect. Jack was still around, and Mark was the CFO of NBC, which was the most complicated job at that moment in time because it was Welch's favorite business. He didn't necessarily like the guy that was running it at the time. It's a village of nuts who work in the media business, for those of you that are in the media business. And Mark was like the one sane guy, right? So I knew he was getting peppered by Welch every day. What's going on down there? What are these guys doing? That kind of stuff. And yet Mark was somebody that everybody trusted and respected. The talent respected him. He was able to draw a hard line, but still understood the context of business. And then as he pivoted out of finance into a variety of P&L, and even the role you see him into today, he's just somebody that's super tough-minded about business, but gets context. Knows where he fits in the world, knows where his company fits in the world, and that's what made Mark so valuable inside GE.
So Mark, was GE your dream job? Was that what you wanted to do from the get-go?
When I graduated from college, I actually wanted to go to law school. Didn't go.
That was a smart move, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't afford it, but looked at all the training programs out there at the time, and I knew I wanted to go to a company with a great training program. That was a great transition from college. Went to GE in upstate New York, and as you said, 35 years later, it was a great run, a great training ground, and now it prepared me well for Equifax over the last 6 years.
So you talk about training, and this is something we've spoken a little bit about. It's interesting, the value of training. And Jeff, maybe you can speak to that, because I'm wondering to what extent training has continued to be a significant activity within a lot of companies. It certainly was at GE.
Look, we were always committed in good times and bad to training, right? Because we viewed it as one of those investments you could make that not only built capability in your organization, but also built culture. So in good times and bad, we did it over and over and over again. And that, look, I had 65 public company CEOs that worked with me, right, as CEO. 120 HR and finance leaders that, because of that investment that we put in. Now, I go to Silicon Valley. Recruiters in Silicon Valley make $20 million a year, right? Recruiters, people that are just in the labor trade, they make more than founders, they make more than CEOs, and so you've got a culture there that's really built on recruiting and not on development. And I think that's one of the weak spots, actually. There's always going to be need for talent, there's always going to be need for founders, But the best, the companies that have actually made it, right? If you sit back and look at a Google, or you sit back and look at Microsoft or Amazon or Salesforce.com and people like that, they're the ones that actually maintain the entrepreneurial spirit, but know when to pivot and start developing people, start developing culture. And so that's why, kind of I've always invested in training. You don't go to a place like Silicon Valley and want to add bureaucracy, but you want to point out to them that at some point you have to start developing your own people, or else you're just going to be completely vulnerable to whatever the latest fad is on talent.
So is it just the founders, though, and the CEO, Jeff, or when you're out there working with these entrepreneurial companies, are the executives under that group?
Oh,
really
totally.
important?
It goes top to bottom. That's why, again, it's been a crazy cycle because COVID, companies believed that they were worth 4 times more than they were in a normal day. Turns out they weren't, But people are hiring 1,000, small companies hiring 1,000 engineers like in 60 days, right? And they're saying, I got a problem. What's your problem today? I can't get the recruiter to take the $5 million from me. They're going to work with somebody else. And I say, that's a problem because it's stupid, right? let's do smarter things than that, right? But that's how you get into the kind of boom-bust cycle that sits on top of what are really some really great companies and some really great ideas.
So Mark, training is important for you at Equifax. I know, by the way, I need to give a shout out to Julia Houston, one of your senior executives who helped pull this together. And thank you so much for being here.
I'll second that shout out to Julia.
Thank you, Julia, and for your leadership. So I'm wondering, how have you put training to work at Equifax? And do you think does it keep people there? Is it a sticky element to it as well that's valuable?
I think it's super important. A company has to have a culture. I'm a strong believer that people have a lot of optionality in where they work, and generally the pay is similar from company A to company B. They stay where they are if they feel connected, if they feel a part of the team, if they feel like they know where they are in the cog in the wheel. I'm a big believer in communications, so heavy communications with the team, around where we're going. We want the strategy to be super transparent. Every Friday at noon, I send an email out to the entire organization of 15,000 people talking about what we did this week. Where we win, where we successes, but that kind of connection. And with it becomes the training. We have entry-level training programs mirrored actually after GE. Many in the room know Rick Smith, who was my predecessor, was a 10-year leader of Equifax. He brought everything good from GE, and I've carried that forward. So we have a lot of the things that we all learned at GE we've carried forward into Equifax.
So let's talk about transformation a second. And Jeff's written a very interesting book, and it is entitled, we used it on our title today, basically hard-won lessons for executives, and in our case, executives in challenging times. So, Jeff, when you first took on the job, a few days later, 9/11 occurred. Tell us a little bit about the transition there. Many of us went through similar transitions. 2008, you went through another transition. Walk us through how you dealt with those transitions.
I'd forgotten about all that crappy stuff, John, until I came here today. I think I went through this hugely choreographed and very public succession process, and then the day I got the job, the whole world changed fundamentally. It was a combination of 9/11 and a combination of Enron and a bunch of stuff that happened more or less at the same time. I think we just live in a volatile time. There's 15,000 leadership books that have been written, right? The average sales of a leadership book is less than 1,000. So it shows you're not reading a bunch of stuff, right? So I kind of wanted to kind of give people a sense of what it really feels like. Not what you think it's going to feel like, but what does it feel like when the decisions are hard, when you're getting criticized all the time? What's it feel like to lead in those moments? Because I felt like that was a swim lane that wasn't, most business books start, let me tell you how great I am, right? And more words to follow. That wasn't the book that I was going to write. So there's a couple of things that are, I'd say, universal about crisis, right? A leadership in crisis. You've got to show up. You've got to be completely present, right? During the financial crisis, I didn't cancel one meeting ever during the financial crisis. you've got to know the difference between decisions and scenarios and information, and you've got to develop a sense of what information and what data and what decision you have to make on the day you have to make it. One of the things about good crisis leaders are they don't over-decide, they don't under-decide. They pick the moment of time. They have to make the big call. They surround themselves with problem solvers. Believe me, both on your board and on your management team. You don't have that many problem solvers. You may think you do, but you don't know that until the really terrible days. And the last thing is you've got to hold two truths. You got to know that you got to survive for today, but there's going to be a future, right? There's going to be a time that goes in the future. Just in general terms, it's like coming out of 9/11, the commercial aviation industry, kind of was going through a crisis. Alan Mulally, who was at Boeing at the time, decided we're going to do the Dreamliner. We're going to build a plane that goes from Sydney to New York City. Everybody thought he was crazy, but it was a way to kind of get everybody rallied around the team. He wasn't saying, let's cut back, let's do this, let's do that. Let's plant a flag and know where you're going to go. So I think for everybody in this room and all your colleagues, all the students that I teach, the ability to lead through volatility is just going to be one of the things you're just going to have to do. It's nonstop, and you haven't seen the next crisis yet, but it's going to come.
So if anybody that's going to Stanford Business School or has a student going there, you may recommend that they go to Jeff's class, because you bring in a lot of key CEOs too, including this guy right here. So let's talk about this guy a second. We talk about transition, we talk about crisis management. You entered into a time at the company that you were dealing with some issues. Tell us a little bit about that and how you jumped in to become a problem solver, Mark, in connection with Equifax.
I'm sure the room remembers in 2017, Equifax was the subject of a cyber attack, actually by the Chinese military. Really remarkable that that's who stole all the data, the 148 million Americans' consumer data. I joined after that to come in and with the team take the company to the next level, but it was a really challenging time for the company. We'd lost the trust of our customers, around the safety of the data. We lost the trust of the public. We certainly lost the trust of the politicians, which is kind of easy. Up in Washington, and the regulators. We had lawsuits, massive amount of lawsuits. Julia was actually the architect of getting those all settled. It took a couple of years to do that. I'm a big believer of never wasting a crisis. And we had an opportunity when that happened to really change the company. First thing was to get the team back to growth. We were somewhat paralyzed in that 6 months between the cyber event and when I joined. And we really compartmentalized the litigation efforts, because we had the attorney generals from all 50 states, we had the CFPB, the FTC, and class action lawsuits. Anyone that could sue us was suing us. But we compartmentalized that and got the rest of the team back to growing the business. Second, being a great data analytics company after a great technology company. I'm a big believer, almost any industry you're in, you have to be a great technology company today. So we had a window there when our stock was down 50%. To put a few $100 million in our legacy tech stack. We had 40 data centers around the globe. We made the decision to go cloud native. And it's going to transform Equifax now for the next decade going forward. So we put $1.5 billion into our tech stack over the last 5 years. We're in the final chapters of completing that, and we believe it's going to position us now for the next decade of leadership in data analytics. So that really galvanizing the team around getting back to running the business, getting back to growing the business, earning back the trust of our customers, of the public. I'll tell you, I mentioned that earlier, John, when we were chatting this morning. One of the things I didn't anticipate in taking on what I knew would be a tough role, and I relished the challenge, was having to testify up in Washington in front of Congress. That's not fun. And if you've had to do it, God bless. I've done it 6 times. I'm going again in November. The first ones were really hard. Although I was the new guy, so I talked a lot about how we're going to fix things. But I spent 4 hours in front of a House Financial Services Committee getting grilled by that group. And as you know, they're typically chasing headlines versus wanting to have a real conversation around the threat to every American company around cyber attacks from nation states like Russia, China, Iraq, Iran, which is where they're coming from. But getting the team back to growth and really investing in that window was just a really unique opportunity to position a 125-year-old company for the next 125 years.
So we're going to maybe just double click on a couple points that Mark made. Compartmentalization, for those of you that are going through crisis, just so essential, and I watch people make mistakes on that all the time. All of the jet engines that are in the GE aerospace business today were all funded during the financial crisis, right? 100% of them. Compartmentalization. The other one is the role of technology. When I look at the legacy world, of which I'm a member of, versus what I see in Silicon Valley, we just never respected technology enough. We just don't have enough comprehension of what it means to really be technology-led, product-led, and that is a huge differentiator. So just to emphasize what Mark said.
No, it's a great point. And I think one of the things that's interesting too is there are very few companies, again, that have been as innovative as GE and now Equifax. So you talked a little bit about board of directors, Jeff, and I know, obviously, Mark, you have dealt with your board as well. Tell us a little bit about, you mentioned the problem solvers on a board. How do you determine the problem solver? And when you're selecting, you're sort of putting together a board, and many people here are doing that, what are some things they should be looking for, given your experience, because you've been in the boardroom a lot?
Look, I mean, I think it's, even today, I find it to be really hard, and I'm on boards now, and I think it's just really hard to get the role right, and it's really hard to get the right people. You don't know your board till you see them on a terrible day. And again, I'm not an expert, in other words, I made plenty of mistakes, so I'm not up here talking as if I did everything right. I didn't, so I just get that out of the way. But, it's hard to be on a board. It's hard to know enough. It's hard to be there, part of the culture. My students get taught that, boards are there because CEOs are wicked, and the only people that can keep them in line is the board. That's not true. I think so. I think try to imagine the people that are going to be with you on your worst day. And on your worst day, there's 3 categories. People that know what to do and help you. People that know what to do but don't have the courage to help you. And people that don't know what to do. So what I try to work with founders on is maximize the first stack and minimize the second 2 stacks. On September 30th of 2008, we had commercial paper, financial crisis, we had commercial paper that was uncovered. I made the decision that we're going to go out and raise $18 billion of equity on a Monday, right? I called my board on Friday night. I said, we got an emergency meeting Saturday. Now, you guys remember, how many people remember September 30th of 2008, right? Wasn't a fun day. I get on there was no Zoom. I get the pod in the middle. Hey guys, sorry about the meeting, but we're going to waste $18 billion on Monday. All right? And Roger Penske, the race car driver, my best director, an amazing guy. He takes over and articulates, here's why we need the money. Let's support the team. Let's go get them. And I got to tell you, during the financial crisis, my board was awesome. So I think get people that can help you and are willing to help you on your worst day. Listen to them, nurture them, treat them with respect, and that's a good board.
So Mark, let me shift from the board, the senior folks, to the youngest folks. So now you've done a great job in building Equifax, building it at a team, utilizing the resources and the training you got at GE, but we've got all these great students coming out of Georgia Tech. I know one gentleman in the audience right now called me up recently and said, my son's got this new idea for a business, it's so fantastic, but he's a junior, and quite frankly, I'd really rather him graduate from Georgia Tech, if at all possible. And so I said, I get that, so I will talk to him and tell him he probably would benefit by taking another year and continue to do the company, but graduate from tech. How do you create innovation? What makes you sticky right now in getting the younger people to want to come to work for the big company? Because it's not like it was, Jeff, back in 1982 when you and I started out.
Yeah, we changed the culture a bunch from 2017, 2018. More of a tech culture. We describe ourselves historically as a data analytics company. We changed and added data analytics technology company. So that was a big part of it. A company that's investing the kind of amounts in itself, whether it's in product or technology, is a place generally people want to be a part of. So that's been a great, kind of attraction to us. We have a pretty high growth rate. We grow almost 10% per year. So being a part of a growth company, is super exciting. And the cultural element of transparency, I think, is one that people like to be a part of also. So, those have been some of the tickets for us to attract. And, I think everyone in this room knows Atlanta is a big tech town. And it's no surprise. When I joined in 2018, I don't think Google, Facebook, and Microsoft were here yet. They're all here now. And they're here for a reason, because it's a great technology town, a great analytics data town. You've got Fiserv and, big companies here. And we're able to attract the very best at Equifax. We have entry-level training programs modeled after very much like what GE does. We have a lot of development along the way. And then, it's a meritocracy, which is very much the GE model. If you're good, you'll advance. If you're not, you don't, which most high-performing, young and middle executive kind of people are really attracted to, and that's the model that we have at Equifax.
So thank you. And you talked about Atlanta, and let's pick up on that concept with Jeff. So Jeff, you're out in Silicon Valley. You're at NEA, one of the leading venture funds in the country. You're an operating partner. You're teaching at Stanford. What are your observations about Atlanta? What do we need to do? What can we do to be more attractive? And I look in the room, we have the Mayor Dickens technology advisor and Donnie Beamer. We've got venture capital funds here from throughout the Southeast. We've got key leaders in the community. They're anxious to hear what do we need to do to be even more attractive to getting Valley money here.
Before I do that, John, just to echo what Mark said, how do you generate excitement at scale? Because the American dream, when Mark and I graduated, was joining a big company, right? Now it's starting your own company. And again, one of the companies that I just have always admired is Walmart. And I think if you're running a big company, what you really have to say is we're in it to win it. We're going to win. And I think where big companies get it wrong is when that's kind of like we'll see, or maybe we'll spin off that or sell that, or what can private equity do? Walmart just gets up every morning and says, I don't care who you are, we're going to win. And I think that's what a big company can do. In terms of the town, look, Georgia Tech is awesome. You've got one of the finest institutions in the world. You've got to build around that. What makes Silicon Valley Silicon Valley? Stanford, starts with Stanford, right? A boatload of money, an incredible amount of money, a network that is amazing, and beautiful weather. Okay, so there's like 4 things that make it really, really good. So I think you got to make Georgia Tech play even a bigger role than it does today, in terms of spanning out companies, leveraging IP. You've got to have funds that circulate around Georgia Tech. You've got all the talent. You've got to build into that. So I'd say that's number one. The VCs in this room and the CEO community, you've got to create an ecosystem. You've got to become customers, you've got to become coaches, you've got to find ways that you can, because you're not going to match the money that exists in Silicon Valley. It's just impossible. So you got to do that. You got to learn how to tell stories about successes and failures and all the things that go with it. And then I just think it's stay in a swim lane that works for you. I say this with love, right? If you're building an AI company and you're walking down Sand Hill Road and say, I'm trying to raise a $100 million Series A and I'm based in Atlanta, you ain't gonna get funded, right? Because the ecosystem thinks that all the AI talent is in San Francisco. But if you sit there and say, look, we built all these successful security companies and we think we can pivot off of what those guys have done, and we're going to raise $10 million, but we're going to turn that $10 million into a $10 billion company, and you do that serially, I think that's what this continues to, that's what this ecosystem continues to be. Mondays are deal days at venture capital firms. Right now, as we sit here, there's 5 presentations going on by, let's say, 2-time founders that have kind of an idea to do LLM models for search that are asking for $80 million with no revenue. That's the point at which the old guy gets up and pretends he's getting coffee and just goes back to his office and says, I got to work on something else. But I think you got an ecosystem. You got to take care of each other. You got to double down on the places where you're best. And as great as Georgia Tech is, it can be even better. It can be more of a centrifugal force than even you're seeing today because you got the talent.
Well,
Can I just jump on Jeff's comments about AI? There's a lot of stuff happening in Atlanta, around AI. Maybe not with the VCs, but certainly with companies like Equifax. Globally, we have 1,000 data analytics professionals across Equifax. 2/3 of those PhDs. We're investing heavily in AI, as you might expect us to do as a data analytics company. We've got almost 200 patents around explainable AI at Equifax and 150 pending. So big effort around leveraging our differentiated data to bring AI-powered products, models, and scores to our customers. So that kind of technology and AI investment is alive and well here in Atlanta.
That's where I'd look, Mark. I'd look at use cases. Like I'd look at nurse productivity. How do you leverage AI? You get your Blue Cross Blue Shield of Georgia, you make them a core customer, and you're out there building a $2 billion market cap company, right? That is awesome. Built on the use case and the technology. That I think, that's what people are doing, and that's where there's going to be great opportunities.
So one thing the two of you done really well is create a network, and part of that comes out of GE. I mean, the number of executives in this community, how many folks worked in GE or a GE affiliate or had anything to do with a GE affiliate in the room? If you think about people like Frank Blake and others, there's a myriad of people, John Rice, John Searle.
CFO at Delta, Jan Jenkins, a GE alumni.
Yeah, and it just one after the other. We were just over at Equifax, and Mark was bringing Jeff around to meet other GE folks. So having a network's important. I know Larry Williams has done a great job with the Technology Association of Georgia building a big network, but the network's been invaluable to you. And I'm wondering, from your standpoint, Jeff, and thinking about some of the venture capitalists too, money's one thing, network's another. How valuable is the network for that early stage company?
Yeah. No, look, don't be mistaken. Like, when you retire, a guy like me, you're going to do either private equity or venture. I wanted to do venture. I wanted to do healthcare. We had lived all over the place, my wife and I. I wanted to see what California was like. I had grown up around Silicon Valley. I wanted to see what part was real, what part was BS. I was still kind of learning myself. So that's how I ended up in venture. If I join a board, great. If I don't, also. But the best thing I can do for a founder is get them their first order. Right? It's not saying you missed your July estimate. I can do that, right? But that's not the best use for me. So I try to provide my best use. What's your first order? How does a founder hire managers, right? Most founders, even myself in my career, right? I finally, if I had 100 people in an organization, I could do all their jobs. But when I had 500 people, I had to start hiring, Mark and I started working together, right? So that's, and then the third thing is what to listen to and what not to listen to. Those are the three things that a guy like me can help a founder with, and that's what I try to do. Now, like I said, I have a CEO or founder in each one of the classes. I teach 12 classes a year. At the end of every class, I explain to my 85 students, this is how I met this person, right? I had David Solomon at Goldman Sachs in my class last year. I told a story about it. Here's David Solomon and I met each other in 2002. We did this deal together in 2006. David saved my ass in 2008, right? And I tell the stories about, because I think this generation is awesome. They're smarter than we are, but they don't know as much about networks. They don't understand human connection and networks. And I want to use the class to show, I've had 85 CEOs and founders in class. I've known all of them in some way other than what I was doing that day. And I think that's the value, another value that I can bring.
That's a great point. We're going to open up the Q&A, and I know we have a microphone that'll probably be roving around. It's right back here. So if you have a question, please go ahead and just come to the back, and I'm going to give my mic to Gina, so we'll have it there.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you both for your insights. So Jeff, I heard loudly a call to action about building scale, excitement, ecosystems, and networks. I think our Rotary Club can certainly help on the last two, given the room on a Monday is where it happens. Mark, I'd like to hear from you. You said your company has, over a century-long heritage with Atlanta. What do you think our club can do to engage and impact our community better?
I think you do a great job. Julie has been a longtime member of it, and I think Equifax over the years, as was pointed out, has probably been involved for many years with organizations like the Rotary and others in town. Being a leading company in an important city like Atlanta, there's a responsibility for a large company like Equifax to really be a part of that ecosystem. And whether it's supporting charitable organizations, supporting the community, and also the networking that comes from being a part of an organization like this, I think is super valuable.
Thank you. The microphone's loaded up there. Any questions from anybody? We seem to have one.
Good to see you both. I'd like to pile on to Mark's question, to John's question, and Mark and Jeff love to hear this. I want to start out just by reading 2 sentences. This was in March of 2024. Georgia Tech has more graduates working in AI than any other school in the country. The Atlanta-based university beat out the University of California at Berkeley, Carnegie Mellon, Stanford, and the University of Southern California. So we constantly hear these messages again that people don't really understand the position in the technology marketplace where Georgia is. What do we have to continue to do to convince people that we're not only a top 5 technology state, we're a global hub of innovation? That's what happens here in Georgia.
I tell you, Equifax is convinced. We know we have a partnership with Georgia Tech around data analytics and around AI at Equifax. We're hiring a lot of their graduates to come into Equifax, so it's one of the feeder schools for us to continue to grow our technology talent. So we're well convinced. In some regards, if the secret stays a little bit of a secret, that's good news for Equifax and the Atlanta companies here, that we're going to get all that great talent. But, I can't state enough how I didn't know Atlanta as well as I do now after being a resident for 6 years and being a part of the community. This is a big tech town. And I think that's really your question. I don't think the world understands it, but I would say they are. Think about Microsoft, Facebook, Google. I think collectively they've got 15 or 20,000 employees here that were not here 7, 8 years ago. So they've figured it out. So the big companies are coming in because they know this is a great community for technology, for data analytics, for entrepreneurship, product capabilities. It's all available here.
Great. It's GE's number 2 recruiting school is Georgia Tech. So Georgia Tech's, again, like Mark, you don't have to tell me. There's a certain snobbery in California and Silicon Valley and all that stuff. So you got about all that. I'll give you another this is half an idea. I'm kind of just thinking out loud. But one of the things you might want to do is go to, take a swing through the Middle East and Asia, hit all the big sovereign wealth funds, because they're the big LPs now, really, for all the venture capital firms. Particularly the big venture capital firms really, used to go to school endowment offices or state treasuries. Now they're going to Mubadala and GIC and all those guys. And I would take your story directly to them as well, right? Because again, they have an incredible amount of sway. And by November, it'll be less than 100 degrees in Dubai. So schedule a trip in November would be my advice. But I'd hit PIF, I'd hit all those big players.
Well, let's amplify that point. You asked the question about who's involved with GE and Stanford. Who's involved with Georgia Tech in some capacity in this room or has children going to Georgia Tech? It's something for us to build off of, right? Baha.
Thank you for a great panel. Mark, I hate to take you back to 2017, the cybersecurity attack. But since then, you've had a lot of experience. I wanted to ask your advice for CEOs when it comes to cybersecurity, and what advice you have for our policymakers as well.
Yeah. 2 different questions. The policymakers has actually been quite challenging. We've worked hard at that to try to convince the policymakers in Washington that the threat to American companies from cyber attacks is principally from nation states. And an attack on a U.S. company, whether it's Equifax or your company or a company next to you, is an attack on the United States. And there isn't as much traction as you would like. I will tell you that between the FBI and Department of Justice, who we collaborated with the day the attack started, through 2019, and then ultimately Attorney General Barr indicted the military officers in the Chinese military that actually conducted the attack on Equifax. That shows some of the sophistication around the arsenal that the U.S. has. Personally, I'd like to see them exercise it more often. If your company's like ours, you're attacked multiple times per day. We see attacks at Equifax in the millions of perimeter hits of companies trying to find a window to get into Equifax. And a big part of why we went from 40 data centers really to one cloud environment, in our case with Google, was to lessen the attack perimeter and then put more layers of security on it. So cybersecurity is going to be a threat for as long as we can see. It's a war that in our view won't end. It's a one that you just have to keep fighting and keep investing in. And it started with us around bringing great people in. Our CISO was actually at Home Depot, helped them with their cyber event back in 2015. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's around when it was. We brought in a whole new team, and we've invested really hundreds of millions of dollars, as you would expect for a company like Equifax, around our technology and the perimeter. It starts, in my view, with having great technology. If you have great technology, you're going to have very sophisticated cyber protections. If you have old legacy technology, it's really hard to maintain. So as a CEO, following kind of my theme of to be a great whatever company you are, you also have to be a great technology company. That means investing in the latest technology that'll bring along with it cybersecurity. In our case, as you might imagine, it's a board discussion every quarter at every board meeting. We formed after the cyber event a technology committee that was focused on technology and cybersecurity because they go together. But it's something that's not going to end. And we've seen so many Atlantic companies and U.S. companies that have just really been hammered from a cyber event, and being out of business for a month, is brutal. And then winning back that trust of your customers. So it's one that investing is super important. Last point is transparency, and that's what we've been really trying to talk to the policymakers in Washington. In many regards, when there's a cyber event on your company, you get blamed, and many times you should be. But we really want to have more transparency about how did it happen. What can others learn from the vulnerability that was there? So we've been super transparent at Equifax around everything we're doing to invest in our technology with our customers, with our partners, actually with our competitors. So if we see attack coming in on Equifax's perimeter, we'll call Experian and TU and say, are you seeing this too? So that network effect really makes us all stronger, which is super important. But it's a war that's not going to end.
I was going to say, Equifax, because of Mark's leadership and what they went through, they're in the top 0.001% of the companies in the U.S. I still think it's a huge vulnerability in the country. There's not enough board awareness. There's not enough technology being invested. I think if you read the risk factors section of an annual report, probably the first year I was CEO, we had 15. By the time I retired, we had 100. That's no longer useful. Right? Sorry, Mark, I'm going to give you work, but if you really wanted to, I would make the CEO identify their top 3 risks, and I would make them personally write an essay about each one in the annual report. And then just say, hey, the rest of the stuff, let Julia handle the other 97, okay? I think the world would be, investors would be so much better off than they are with thousands of words of gibberish that are just put in there just to CYA. And I think cyber's really at the top of that list, in my opinion.
Good counsel. We have time for one more question, Clark.
Great, thank you. So you guys, both from your legacy at GE and certainly the current organizations you serve, really legendary businesses as far as talent management goes. And you've talked a little bit about that, identifying talent, developing talent. What lessons have you learned over the past couple of years since the pandemic? As a lot of folks have gone remote, how have you managed the core relationships that exist between management and their people? And how do you build team cohesion? How have you leaned into that to really enhance performance of organizations?
Yeah, it's super hard. We always feel, I'm a bit of an old school leader, maybe given my tenure. But I also believe there's an element of, I learned a lot through the COVID pandemic, that remote works. There's an element of remote that you can do over Zoom calls, you can do over communicating, but you also have to be in person. Mm-hmm. So that hybrid mix was super important to us. We struggled getting people back to the office, like everybody in the room, I'm sure. We started pick 3 days a week to come in. Then we said 3 days are mandatory. And then we've gone to, which is finally working, we said Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, mandatory days in the office. Monday, Friday, you can decide if you want to be remote. We've got high performance around the 3 mandatory days. And mandatory for us is mandatory. It was so important to us to have the teams in the office so the tech team, the product team, the DNA team, the commercial teams can collaborate around innovation, new products on those 3 days. The other thing we had that was really well received is we said pick 2 weeks a year, addition to your vacation or PTO time, where you can be fully remote. So you had some flexibility in there. So you might imagine Friday's a super quiet day. Traffic's pretty good in Atlanta, on Fridays. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday seems a lot of people are doing that also. But it's the right balance for us. And I think we also learned a lot around collaborating with partners, customers, about mixing in-person with the Zoom calls. It makes that in-person call more valuable when you're face-to-face, but it doesn't replace it. A meeting like this we could do on Zoom. For me, it wouldn't be the same. It probably wouldn't be for you if you had all your meetings virtually. It's the same thing, I think, in business, either in your team or with customers and partners.
I'm on the board of a company called Twilio. I wanted to join a board of a founder-led company. We were remote first, right? And kind of what I insist on as a board member is what are the 5 metrics we're going to measure? And if those metrics are moving in the right direction, hey, great, it's working. And if they're not moving in the right direction, guess what? They're not. Whatever we're doing is not working. But I look back and I was in the late '80s. I was running our appliance service business, and I made the edict of managers in the field didn't have to wear ties. And people said, nobody's going to take us seriously if we don't wear ties. In the late '90s, I was running our healthcare business. I argued to Jack Welch, we should have on-site daycare. I did it for a year. And he finally said, okay, you can do it, but don't tell anybody. The point I'm making, remote work is bigger than those. My point is making is, look, we're always modernizing the workplace. And we're always taking on things that we think are legendary. And what really matters is getting great people that are accountable to each other and to the company, that are motivated to learn and treat customers the right way. And if you're going to do that, do it, right? And it can work in a lot of different ways. But you got to do everything Mark said, which is you got to build the rest of the infrastructure so it works.
Most of the CEOs I interact with that have remote workforce are trying to figure out how to unwind it. It just doesn't work for them. And maybe it does for some companies. I haven't met any that it does. And it's so complex. We don't do remote. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you've got to be, near an Equifax location, whether it's Atlanta, St. Louis, Boise, Louisville. We've got a number of big locations. Atlanta's the biggest, but we don't do remote. And the friends I talk to, or their CEOs, are trying to figure out how do I get everyone out of that remote for all the collaboration.
Right. Awesome. Thank you.
Before we thank our panel for their time, I wanted to give you a quick preview of some upcoming programming. The next 2 programs are around public health. Actually, Jeff will have the CDC here talking about how to attract VC money into some game-changing research that's happening right here in Atlanta. Then we have somebody from Grady in the ER room, Mark, who's using AI to be even more efficient, to your point about technology. So we're very, very excited about that. And then we'll be picking up the theme around elections on October the 7th, when Dennis has kindly offered to moderate a conversation with Judge Luddig, which I think will be very engaging. And there are some of the other guests coming to Rotary in the coming weeks. I wanted to call out Michaela Ulmer. So mark that down for Daughters Day. If you don't know who Michaela is, I challenge you all to take a look at Michaela. We're very, very excited that she'll be coming to our club in December. So Jeff and Mark, you have demanding schedules. Julia, you pulled a rabbit out of the hat. It was awesome. Thank you so much for your time and for your insight and clear call to actions. And past President John, I'm sorry I ran 2 minutes over time. We know how you like it. But thank you for leading us in this engaging discussion. This meeting is adjourned.